The next assignment, which is going to be due a week from today, so on the 23rd, is your exegetical teaching paper. And your exegetical teaching paper has two places where you can find, as you see, it's going to be based on all of the other assignments, E1 through E6, that you've done in terms of this big paper. So if you look in your textbook on page 455, Appendix 2, which was part of your reading homework for today, there are directions for this paper, okay? There are directions for this paper. I'm going to give you a few additional directions, and of course, this handout that we're looking at right now, the handout for this slideshow, is available, so you can print that, use your book, and use your workbook, either one, they're the same, so that you make sure you get all the elements of your paper handled. So the directions for the assignment are included in Appendix 2 of the textbook and on page 177, 178 of the workbook. Papers should be 9 to 13 pages in content length and should reference at least 10 academic sources in your paper as a whole. So your instructions in the book say you have to have at least 4 sources. I want you to have at least 10 academic sources in your paper that you reference. Okay? A lot of those are going to come from your word study because you have a concordance that you use. That's a source. It's going to come from your exegetical research report that you're doing over the weekend. And you're going to want to finish that exegetical research report and get it turned in because you're going to have to turn right around and 2 days later be done with this paper. But the good news is your exegetical research report is actually going to be several pages of this paper. So that's good news, right? So you're actually writing both papers at once while you're doing your E6 assignment because that's going to contribute to this paper. But it's important enough, it's an important enough step that I want to make sure that you really do a good job on it. So let's see, all of your work must be typed in 12-point font and double-spaced with 1-inch margins. The 9 to 13 page content length required for this paper excludes the title page and the bibliography. So it does not count the title page and it does not count the bibliography. Okay, it does not count the title page, it does not count the bibliography. Note, I said bibliography for this paper. A works cited means everything that's on your works cited is in your paper. And you have to, for this paper, you have to have 10 sources used in your paper. But your bibliography can actually include things that you researched but didn't include in your paper. So all of those redundant commentaries that didn't say something unique, I want to know that you read them. I want you to know that you did the research. So even if you don't use a source, but you researched and you did work in it, write it down and include it in your bibliography for this paper. The other paper is a works cited, so everything that's in the works cited must be in the exegetical research report. But with the big paper, you can include things that weren't part of your final paper. Does that make sense? So you're allowed to do that. So you've done something with them because you explored them at some point when you were doing research or something, but you're not quoting them. You can still include them in a bibliography, but not a works cited. Does that make sense? A works cited, these are works that you're actually citing. A bibliography is just your research. You need to use at least 10 sources in your paper, and all 10 sources must be included in your bibliography. So your bibliography will be longer, but it must include all 10 sources. that you use in your paper. So that's in addition to what they have here. Well, actually, it's kind of a summary of what they have here with a little bit of clarification there. All right. What format do you guys use in class, in your classes? Do you use MLA or APA, or what are you guys using right now?
MLA mostly.
MLA mostly. Yeah. So.
A couple use it depending on the major.
What's that?
A couple of the classes decide it based on your major, but the majority of it has been MLA.
Okay. So I know that was a discussion we were having in a faculty meeting before Dr. Rayburn got sick, and then coronavirus and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know that I was wondering where it was at currently. So be consistent. Whatever format you use, be consistent with this paper. Okay. Which means you want it to be the same as you use in the previous paper, the E6 assignment, because you're going to copy and paste that into this paper, which is nice. So by Tuesday, you will have already written 3 or 4 pages of this paper because you'll have already turned it in. All right, so that's additional notes about the form. The content of the paper, the title page should include all 5 items listed in your instructions, center justified, and cleanly presented on a single page. I have given you a sample document for this as well. It says sample exegetical paper, Ephesians 4:25 through 32. And no one has that passage. It's left out on purpose. It's left out so that I can provide you with the sample paper. And because they talk about it in your book. So I don't want to give anybody any unfair advantages. All right, are you looking at the sample cover page right there? Okay, so this is what the cover page looks like. Notice Stuart Dent uses his full name instead of his nickname Stu because it's a formal paper. So you can see this right here, and you're going to copy basically the idea, and this is what you're going to do. You've got your summary sheet right here where you've got your main idea in a single sentence. This is your 1-sentence summary of your passage. Then you're going to provide me with your outline. If you have subpoints for your outline, like if I said Roman numeral 2 is verses 26 and 27, then I might do A, 26 is this, B, 27 is this. So it might be A, godly anger is righteous, verse 26. B, ungodly anger is destructive, verse 27. So you can break it down further than that if you want to. And then notice I don't write anything on the bottom of this page. So this is a page of your content. So your 9 to 13 pages just very easily got 1 page done because it's a 1-sentence summary and your outline. And then you're going to do a page break and you're going to skip to the next page. Now again, I would print this document. You're going to give me your title, okay? And then you're going to give me your next sections. Your next section is going to be your introduction, okay? Your introduction is a half page to a page. This one's about a half a page. And I just wrote the same thing over and over again to where it used up. The introduction should gain the reader's attention and introduce the main idea of your passage. So you've already stated it in 1 sentence, but now you're going to unfold it a little bit. And then you've got your context. Your context has to include your historical cultural context right here. and your literary context. You have to have both your your historical cultural context and your literary context. Um, and then you're going to write, I just repeated those paragraphs, um, and read through this paper because there are additional instructions in here. Be sure you use your tools for identifying the historical cultural context. Um, answer the question, what do your readers need to know about the biblical author, the original audience, and their world in order to grasp the meaning of the passage? So here's that section. Then you're going to get to your content. Your content is 5 to 8 pages, which means your exegetical research report needs to be 5 to 8 pages. Your exegetical research report can be longer, but you're going to need to shorten it so that your total page length isn't too much, or you're going to need to lengthen it so that your total page number is the right, because you want 5 to 8 pages in the content section. This is the main body of your paper and your exegetical work. So notice I've got kind of an introduction to the content. This is what my verse is about. This is how it fits. You've already talked about that a little. This is what it means. This is what my verse means right here. All right. Then you're going to go through verse by verse, just like you did in your other paper. Notice the format's a little bit different, because this now becomes the first line of the paragraph instead of a separate thing. But you go to the front of this paragraph and you hit delete, and it takes away the break, and there you go. What you're going to do is you're not just going to you're not just going to plug in your paper, like I said. I didn't mean to say it that way. What you're going to do is you are going to explain what you found for each verse. Okay? Which means, unlike your previous assignment, you are not just gathering research, you are now going to evaluate the research that you have gathered. So I want to see your opinion. I want to see your thoughts as you interact with your research. I want to see your thoughts as you interact with your research. And so this is the second one. And notice, instead of the verse number, I've given the verse a summary title, just like you do when you're outline. And what this is, you see this right here? Do you know where I got this? Where I got this phrase right here? I got it from my outline. I made my outline. I copied this line right here. Boom. I brought it down here, and I entered it. And then I started explaining it. Why did I call that? Why did I name it this section? What is this about? Teach me about this verse in this passage. So that's your content. Your content's half of your paper. It's the largest part of your paper, okay? After your content, and however many points I have in my outline is how many subpoints I have in my content, then I'm going to have application. So for my content, I had an introduction to the content, and then I had each verse considered. And now I've got application. This, by the way, is what a block quote looks like. And it has a paragraph break in the block quote, so that's included here. It's indented on both sides, half an inch from the end of the text here, half an inch from the end of the text here. So it's got an 1.5 inch margin on each side. And then I've got my parenthetical reference right here. This is a block quote. This is directly from our textbook, word for word, every dot, period, cross T, everything. But this is in my application section, and I'm going to make your application specific for your passage and all of those kinds of things. One of the places up here in the beginning of the content is you will want to restate your theological principle, or which is the same thing as basically the same thing, if not exactly the same thing, as your one-line summary of the meaning of your passage. So all this work that we've been doing, the main idea of the passage is this is your theological principle. Or it can be, or it can either be your theological principle, or it can be your one-sentence summary of what the passage meant in its historical context. So either one, but you are going to want to make sure you include your theological principle here in this first section of the content before you get into your different sections. And then notice, I get down to the end. It's a long paper. And I have my bibliography. Notice the format I want you to use for your entries for the bibliography. And I would like you to use MLA formatting for the bibliography. I'd like you to use MLA formatting for the whole paper, but I do want you to use it for the bibliography. And in case you didn't know, MLA actually does have a bibliographic formatting. It's just not everybody uses it for all of their classes. By the way, do you see these sources that are in my bibliography? This bibliography is online and available to you. These right here are just some samples, and then I go into the generic fake ones. But these samples are all good sources. So you can go find these and use them. When I had this, I actually have a longer list of sources for Ephesians, but it didn't get in this sample, and I don't remember where it is. So it doesn't, like Lincoln and stuff like that. Lincoln did the Word Biblical Commentary. He's a good one. I already mentioned him. So anyway, this is that's what this is. That's what your E7 assignment is going to look like. So let's go back and just get back, work through the rest of this slideshow. These are the things that we just talked about. All right, the title page should include all 5 items. The main idea and outline page should closely follow the instructions that are in your book. Okay. Main idea and outline is on the bottom of page 455. You're going to identify your passage, then summarize the main idea of the passage in 1 sentence. Next, present a full outline of your passage, showing how the main idea unfolds. And notice an outline means Roman numerals. It means break it down into parts. That's what an outline form is. Okay. The first section of your paper is the introduction of the content of your paper. Is the introduction. We talked about that. That's a half page to a page long. And that's a summary of where you are going with your work. The context section should include both historical, cultural, and literary observations. The content section is basically a breakdown of your findings by passage or section, demonstrating what you have identified as the main point or main theological principle of your passage. So it should all point, you should be able to defend from every verse in your passage what you claim is the main point of that passage. Every verse in your passage should point back to that main point. And that's what you're going to do with your research. You're going to show through your research how that is true. The application section of your paper is an important one-page discussion of several practical and realistic contemporary applications of your passage's main theological principle. When you get to the end of that, you're going to do a page break because your bibliography should begin a new page and include at least 10 sources used in the body of your paper. It can include other sources as well. Some other things that might be helpful for you, there's a checklist. If you look in your workbook on page Okay, so continuing on. There's a checklist provided for you in the workbook and in your text that will give you a good idea of the grade you should expect to receive on the assignment. In addition to this list, you should remember that you actually need to use 10 sources instead of 4. Your checklist says I've used at least 4. I've consulted at least 4 reputable sources. That is not enough for a research paper. Um, a sample paper is available on Populi, and I want you to refer to that document. It has some clarifying instructions in it, as we've already seen. If you have any questions about the paper after consulting these resources, ask them during class for the benefit of all students. We will have one more class meeting before you have to turn in this paper. So what I'm hoping is that we can use part of our time next class. I'm hoping we can use part of our time to answer any questions you have. But if you haven't started the paper yet, then you're not even going to know what questions to ask. So get your exegetical research report done and then start working on this paper this weekend so that you actually know what questions to ask when we meet again on Tuesday, okay?